Welcome to the show. This is Sandy's Paddling Podcast, where we'll be sharing stories about rivers and canoe racing in and around Texas. On our very first episode, I'm so excited to get to interview my dad, Tom Goynes, about how he got into canoeing and canoe racing in 1967 when he attempted his first Texas water safari with his older brother, Jim Goynes, and friend Ricky Page. Without further ado, here's the story of how it all began. We're going to talk about his first race and kind of how he discovered the river. So we've got to go way back.
1950.
50. Okay, so we're in the 50s. And you were the third born of your family of five? Is that?
That is correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Mike, Jim, then me, then Mary, then Lee.
Now, y'all went fishing and things like that, right? Grandpa would take you... I know he did a lot of hunting, so y'all were outside a lot.
Yep, we would mostly hunt a place to hunt. We would head north of Houston into the national forest and look for a place to hunt, because that was the only free hunting area. It was kind of dangerous. A lot of crazy hunters shooting at anything they heard. So it was a dangerous place to hunt, and very seldom would you see an animal. Just other crazy hunters. Anyway. But yeah, we would go fishing. We knew a family that had a pier at San Leon. That was always the most productive fishing. We could catch a lot of hardhead. Sometimes croakers.
Did you have a John boat, or what was the...
At that place, we would just fish off the pier. But Dad had a propensity to buy... old outboard motors and boats, and most of our boating experiences were just trying to get the outboard motor started. But occasionally we'd run, and we would go to places like the San Jacinto River below Lake Houston. Occasionally we would motorboat around on Lake Houston. I know we did some goose hunting there.
And how old were y'all as kids? I mean, did he take all of you, or was it...
A lot of them were not interested. Most of the time, I would go with Dad when we hunted. Jim would go occasionally. Mike, by then, might have already been in the service. I don't remember Mike going on a lot of hunting trips, some, but...
was he 4 years or 5 years older than you?
I think only 3.
3.
It was like, he was 3 years older, Jim was 1 year older, and then along came me. I think that was about it, so... We would motor up and down Clear Creek and just had a lot of adventures in motorboats where sometimes the engine would conk out and I would get to paddle. So anyway, I think that's where I learned that paddling was probably a more
reliable
method of transportation on the water, because the motorboats were questionable.
And so y'all got, I guess, a subscription to the Houston Chronicle, which was a newspaper at the time.
I always remember the Houston Chronicle from early years, and I kind of fell in love with an article on the Outdoors written by Bob Brister, the Outdoors editor, and I always wanted to go hunting where you could actually shoot deer. I always had dreams of actually killing a deer someday. But anyway, he just really got my attention, and I always thought I'd like to be an outdoor writer because I wanted to be like Bob Brister. So.
And how old were you at the time when you, like 11?
Oh, that would have been, early, maybe just preteens even, but certainly in my teenage years, I really enjoyed reading his articles, yeah.
And so he's the one who wrote the article on the first safari?
Yeah, it appeared on the front page of the Houston Chronicle.
I can't believe they got... I mean, how did they even hear about that? That was pretty...
Well, it was... that first safari was pretty big news. I understand they were going to make the cover of Life magazine that year.
Really?
Or that month, but the Pope died. I don't know if that was John the 23rd, Anyway, so they didn't make the cover, but they were in Life magazine.
Wow.
And there was a magazine called Argosy, and it did make the cover of Argosy magazine. It was a magazine for adventure lovers, and it was a fascinating race. The idea of racing nonstop all the way from San Marcos to at the time Hopper's Landing. That was the nonstop portion, and then they would do the bake portion to Carpus in 1 day interval. So they would wait, and it was a pretty long wait. I think they waited at least a week for everyone to get to Hopper's Landing, and then off they went to Corpus Christi. So it was I think more than 1 week long. I could be wrong in that, but it was a long, substantial race.
Oh, wow. So you heard about it after it had happened. You were reading an article about.
It was actually during the event. On the front page of the Houston Chronicle, there was a picture of Lynn Maltmer and Jim Jones, two Houston policemen. And that was the other thing that I think Houston was interested in, because two Houston police officers were in the race. Jimmy Jones was a detective. I'm not sure what role Lynn had. I don't know if he was just an officer on the beat or what. But anyway, they did the race together, and they were actually in the lead substantially over Fred Hurd and Sam Hare. Fred was I think he was a flight engineer for Exxon Mobil, if I'm thinking straight. But anyway, he knew aircraft, but he also was a very insightful guy, very concerned about weight. Maybe that's from his airplane days, but anyway, he always had the lightest canoe and the lightest gear he can come up with.
Huh.
I think he did a lot of backpacking.
Do you remember what kind of canoe it was that they were in?
I think both teams were in aluminum canoes. They probably were both Grumman.
Okay. I was going to say Grummans.
Grumman was the end boat at the time. And Jimmy Jones and Lynn Maltmer, I know, were sailing. I suspect Joe was as well, because you were allowed to sail. You had to take your sail and all the gear from the start to Carpus. So you started in San Marcos. If you wanted to sail, you had to figure out a mast and the whole 9 yards. A lot of the teams would row. I think Fred was just paddling, but Jimmy and Lynn were quite a ways ahead of Fred. But they were trying to make it into Ingleside. The last night's camp would have been at Ingleside, Texas, which leaves about maybe 6 miles of open bay you have to cross to get to the finish line there at Emerald Beach in Corpus Christi. I think it finished at the Holiday Inn at Emerald Beach. But that day, that second to the last day of the race, the trip into Ingleside was evidently very rough. I don't know if only 2 teams started that day, but only 2 teams made it to Ingleside. And the first team in was Fred Hurd and Sam Hare. So they made it into Ingleside, and the clock was ticking. According to the Coast Guard, the race could only be held during daylight hours.
Ah, that makes sense.
So at sundown, time was up. You had to be in. And we were approaching sundown, and evidently Bob Brister and the photographer for Life magazine were there, and they were working together on the story. I think Bob may have written the story for Life magazine that year. But Fred Hurd approached them, and he said, look, use a motorboat. They had motorboats available for the press. They said, take a motorboat, go find those guys, and tell them that they weren't man enough to finish this race. They shouldn't have entered it. shouldn't have entered it in the first place. So, and Fred knew that would
Really encourage him.
That would fire him up. So anyway, the photographer for life and Bob Rister went up the beach, and sure enough, they found Jimmy and Lynn, and because I could see their sail. They had a sail, and both men were on the beach. Jimmy was pretty much on his back, passed out, and Lynn was on his elbows throwing up. Okay. So I guess they were seasick, probably sick of whatever food they had been eating all week. Maybe it was just a week long. But at any rate, it was a long way to have to carry all your food with you. And Bob said he went and told Lynn Maltmer that, didn't have the guts to finish this thing. He shouldn't have entered it. And they said you could see the veins pop out on his neck. And he got up and he went over and lifted Jimmy off the sand and shook him, and they walked up and down the beach for a while and then got in their boat and came
as
into
one does when you're feeling real sick and you got to pep yourself up to get back in the boat.
Yeah.
You got to walk back and forth.
Yeah. So they came into the finish line, and there's a lot of discrepancy on what exactly happened, but I talked to Fred Hurd about this, and I'm pretty sure, and other witnesses, I'm pretty sure I have it straight. But the head judge turned to Fred and said, "What time have you got, Fred?" And knowing that sundown was 10 minutes past, or they were already...
Right.
He gave him a time. It was 10 minutes earlier than it really was. And so they put that down as the official time. And Lynn and
Fred's
Jimmy...
the one that had just won. So
he could have won if he had disqualified the second place boat. He would have won the race. Fred Hurd and Sam Hare.
Okay.
But in true safari sportsmanship, camaraderie and all that good stuff, he wouldn't do it. He let Lynn and Jimmy win, and I think that was worthy of remembering. It was a great first race.
And is that the photo, that iconic photo of the guy in the mud?
Yep, that's the one that's on a T-shirt and used a lot. I think I'm pretty sure Tom Stallman actually
drew that
from the photo, but there are copies of the actual photo circulating out there. So
that's cool.
So that's. It didn't have the whole story of the sundown thing.
Okay.
In the paper, that never appeared publicly, but I learned that later. But at the time, I just remembered I would have been 12 years old. No, let's see. No, wait, this was 63. So I would have been 12, and I remember thinking, I've got to do this someday. This is just too...
I don't think that's a normal 12-year-old's reaction.
Too good a thing to pass up. So anyway, that was my first memory of the safari, and that's when I decided, someday I'm going to have to do this race. And it took a while. I was 16, so it took 4 years when we did actually enter the race for that first safari in 1967. So.
Did you follow, did they do a story every year on the safari?
There was a year, I think it might have been 66, the year before I raced, where they had moved the finish line from Corpus to Freeport, which was longer and actually a lot harder. It involved crossing Matagorda Bay.
Oh, gosh.
And in 66, I'm pretty sure only one boat finished.
Wow.
And that was the Bloodworth brothers who won the race.
Did they row the bay?
They would have rowed, I think, the whole time. I don't think they had sails.
Oh, my gosh.
Some people were still attempting to sail, but sailing kind of fell from favor because you never could trust the winds.
Yeah, because the Bloodworth brothers were from
They're Houstonians, yeah.
Oh, okay, Houston.
They owned Bloodworth shipping yards. I don't know if that's still a thing or not.
Okay, but they were kind of famous scullers, right? They didn't use paddles at all during the race, did they, or did they?
I'm not sure. I've only heard of them sculling.
Right.
And I've never seen a picture of them with paddles in their hands. I have seen Froggy Sanders, Robert Sanders. There's a picture of him with the paddle, so I know he used to paddle some.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about the Bloodworths.
I would think it would just destroy your backside to do, especially if it ended in Freeport, to have to row that entire race would be horrible.
Well, you've got sliding seats, and
I guess.
you know, it's not a bad way to travel. The hardest thing is having to look around behind you.
Your neck.
There are no coxswains on the safari boat, so you have to constantly be looking over your shoulder.
And getting through all the upper river with the trees and
trees,
stuff.
limbs, roots, rocks. Yeah, it's amazing. I've sculled the race, but never from the start. Always started paddling, and then when we'd hit a lake like above Staples, we might switch over and start sculling. But and certainly by the time you got to the Guadalupe River at Gonzales, then you were in pretty good sculling territory then.
Yeah. So you kind of, what was your training like for the first safari? I mean, when did your team kind of come together and you found a boat and all that stuff?
Well, the very first boat we attempted, or we thought we were going to use, was my dad's 14-foot V-bottom aluminum motorboat.
Oh.
It weighed a ton. I don't know how much it weighed, but it was on a trailer. Oh. And we hauled that to a reservoir south of Houston. It was actually on the banks of Clear Creek, but it was a pretty good-sized reservoir, I guess, for the farmers there. And put the thing in and rode it around on that reservoir, and we thought, this is probably too heavy to portage. But that was going to be our boat because you weren't limited. You didn't have to use a canoe. There were some V-bottom boats that actually finished the race. And anyway, we kind of thought a canoe might be the way to go. I know I had seen a canoe when my dad and I were motorboating on Clear Creek with a family in it, mom and dad and a kid, and I thought, wow, now that. They had no motor to conk out, and it just looked right. I thought that is the way to go, but we're going to find a canoe in Houston. And so it was a kind of a pipe dream, and then one day we saw an ad in the paper. I don't know if it was in the Chronicle or one of the little free green sheets. But it was a 16-foot Old Town wooden canvas canoe, and the guy was asking $100 for it. Today it would be worth thousands.
Right.
I mean, it'd be a collector's item. But at the time, he was just getting rid of it. And Jim and I, between us, did not have $100.
So how did you talk Uncle Jim into doing this with you? Or was he kind of enthralled by it too when he saw the paper?
Jim was into snakes. His thing was he loved to catch and play with snakes. Didn't matter what kind. We had some venomous snakes back in those days. I know we had coral heads.
In the house?
That were in the house.
Oh,
Mom,
my gosh.
You know what Mom didn't know wouldn't hurt her.
Was the raccoon also in the house at this time? Aunt Mary's pet raccoon?
The coon pretty much stayed outside in a cage.
Oh.
But the snakes would be in a cage for a while, and then they would eventually make it out. They, they just spend their whole day pushing on the hardware cloth with the bricks on it, on top of the aquarium. So, yeah, the snakes would escape regularly. Not so much the coral snakes. I don't think they were strong enough to lift the bricks. But anyway, he would see a snake and just have to have it, And we did have a lot of harmless snakes, like hog-nosed snakes, and they were fun.
But they were in the house.
Yeah, and
Were they in your bedroom?
in Jim's bedroom, but I was in the same room as him.
I was going to
so,
say you
yeah,
had to have been sharing somehow.
We
That had
we
to
often
stink.
had a snake.
That couldn't have smelled good.
Oh, they weren't too bad.
No,
They're nice.
gosh.
I mean,
I can't believe Grandma let
they
y'all
eat
do that.
live. Most of them ate live food, so it wasn't like you had rotten food sitting around. And we would get to watch them as they ate their white mice or their frog. Frogs were fun. Hognose snakes, eating frogs was always a treat.
And Uncle Jim's a year older than you?
Yep.
Okay.
So anyway, he mostly just wanted to catch snakes. I wanted to do the safari. And somehow, and we kind of had a symbiotic relationship because there are lots of snakes out on the river. So anyway, we decided we'd go in with our buddy Ricky Page. Jimmy Page was another guy, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. Anyway, the Page family, their boys went to the same high school, St. Thomas High School. And Jim and I had bought, I don't know how we had $200, but we bought a Volkswagen for $200. So we had the transportation, and we would drive across Houston every day to go to St. Thomas and take the Page boys. And I think we charged them 25 cents a day to take them to and from. That's each. So that was 50 cents times, that was $2.50 a week.
Wow.
We paid for the gas and had money left over, so we were doing okay. But when we found that canoe, we went to Ricky, who was bigger and stronger than either of us.
And what grade, or was he your age, or?
He was my brother. He was Jim's age, so a year older. So I would have been 16. They were 17.
Okay.
We were probably, I guess, juniors. They might have been juniors.
Yeah, you were probably
at St. Thomas.
Yeah.
But we bought the canoe, and then we decided, well, we need the train, so we would go to Clear Creek and load the canoe up with camping gear, and we would paddle way, way up Clear Creek and camp out, and we would catch crabs, and because we thought, the safari was going to be an adventure where we would...
Right, you weren't planning
in the early days, that's the way they did it. They would shoot squirrels.
Right, they didn't bring a lot of food. I mean, they had to have brought some food, but not all of
maybe
the food.
Some the coffee and the flour, but you were supposed to shoot and kill animals and eat them, and it was an adventure, So that was our thinking. When we would catch fish and crabs when we got to the coast, and so we spent quite a bit of time paddling up and down Clear Creek. I do remember one event where we must have gone on top of a gator or possibly a porpoise, but we had all three of us and our camping gear in that canoe, and something lifted the whole boat out of the water, completely out of the water, and then dropped us back in the water.
Had to have been a gator.
I don't remember a lot of weird splashing, though. It was always like maybe a porpoise was having fun and came underneath us and lifted us and dropped us, because I have since seen porpoise on the creek. They do go up in there. Some have told me they go up in there when they're old and they go to escape sharks, but at any rate, that was an adventure. But that was our training. We paddled up and down Clear Creek.
Did you ever see the San Marcos at all before the race? Or?
No,
not once.
We did see a log jam once. We paddled so far up Clear Creek that we came to a tree across the creek, and we said, "Well, that's it. That's as far as we go." So we had no idea that there would be trees across the San Marcos River. That was kind of a surprise.
Did you ever get to talk to anybody that had done the safari before doing the safari?
No, we had read the articles in the Chronicle, but they were talking more about the adventures and
not a comprehensive
pictures of guys on the beach. So we knew very little. We did not know what duct tape was, which was unfortunate. I would have thought we would have had baling wire, because my dad always patched things with baling wire, but rarely duct tape. I don't remember duct tape much. So we got to the check-in, and
Did Grandma bring you, or were y'all on your own?
Grandma was always willing to take us to exotic places and drop us off. I really think there were too many mouths to feed, and I really think if she could get rid of me and Jim, it would have been a real blessing. So yeah, she said, "Oh yeah, canoe race all the way to." At the time, it was going to Freeport.
So how many miles would that have been? 3?
Well, they said it was 500 and something.
Oh, I don't think
it was the river is 418 kilometers.
Oh,
and
so they were measuring in kilometers.
They got a good measurement, but they used the wrong scale and thought that's a mile.
I see.
We didn't know about the metric system much. So anyway, the river was always 418 miles, but really it's 260 miles, 419 kilometers. And then I think to get to Corpus, it was about 80 miles further. So the first safari, I think they advertised as 500 miles.
But it was really 300 and...
Yeah, 340,
40
something like that.
Yeah.
Still a long race, but then when it went to Freeport, it was at least 20 miles longer. So it was probably
400.
approaching 400 miles when they went all the way to Freeport.
That's nuts.
But as I was about to say earlier, they did have to truck the boats around Matagorda Bay, I think, in both 66 and 67. I might have the facts wrong about 66, but I know in 67 they decided it was just too rough, and they took a poll, and all the guys said, yeah, truck us around.
Oh, wow.
And that, Bob Risser I don't think he wrote about it after that, perhaps. But I know Stan Slayton, the other outdoor writer, was very upset. Because he had actually dropped out of the first safari, and his attitude was, look, if no one can finish, that's it.
Right,
it's
they all
just we have a
drop out.
race that no one finished.
Oh, wow.
So he was very upset with the race, but the race kept going in spite of that. But we were destined to go all the way from Santa Marcas to Freeport, even though we had never seen.
What do you think your longest training run was prior to?
Well, we would call it a 2-day training run,
Oh, no.
but it was really just paddling one day, camping out, and paddling the next.
You think y'all made it like 10 miles or?
Maybe, but we weren't moving very fast. One thing we noticed was the stern man seemed to have some sort of an advantage, because when the stern man paddled on his right, no matter how strong the bowman was, the boat turned left. So we came up with the system. We decided, well, you would start off in the bow on your right side, because that was everyone's strongest side. We were all right-handed. And the stern man would paddle on his left side. And then after, I think it was 15 minutes.
15 minutes.
You would stay on that side for 15 minutes.
Oh, my gosh.
And then everyone got up, and the guy in the bow would move to the stern so he could paddle on his left side.
Oh, my gosh.
The guy in the middle, who had just been sitting there resting, would be all rested up, so he would get in the bow.
I mean, had y'all ever seen anybody actually paddling? Like, you didn't know anybody who knew how to paddle a canoe.
That's not exactly true. I had noticed these 30 people on Clear Creek, father, mother, and
That was one
and
time.
they seemed to have it together. So I thought, how hard can this be?
Oh,
I mean,
man.
no one ever took a lesson
Y'all would have benefited from
to learn how to canoe.
some YouTube videos. Too bad.
Yeah, YouTube hadn't been dreamt of yet.
No.
So yeah, we had no idea what a J-stroke was or anything. We just knew that if you wanted to go left, either the stern man would have to move to his right side, or and both guys paddle on the left side, something.
Just had to switch bow and stern seats, obviously.
Yeah, and then you switched when you were tired of paddling on the right, you moved to the stern, paddle on your left, and then you got a break in 30 minutes. So every 15 minutes we switched, And that seemed to be a pretty intelligent plan.
Now, did you always plan for the middle person to not paddle, to just be resting?
Right,
Or was
yeah, the middle person was not expecting to paddle because, I mean, we were sitting on the bottom of this canoe.
Oh, you didn't have a seat.
We didn't kneel, we knew nothing.
Oh.
So you were sitting in the bilge water,
Ugh.
resting with your back leaned up against the thwart, sitting on a life jacket or maybe a cushion. And at the start of the race, I, being the youngest, was told I started in the middle, sitting on the bottom of the canoe. And as soon as the gun went off, the crowds were hollering, "Why isn't the guy in the middle paddling?" I couldn't have that, so I attempted to paddle from a seated position in the middle of the canoe. And then the question was, well, which side should I paddle on? Well, because the sternman always seemed to have the advantage, it was decided
Yeah.
the bowman and the middleman would paddle on their left and the sternman on his right. And that actually seemed to help out. So we were making very good time. I remember we started in City Park, so when we got to Rio Vista Falls, it was like, what in the world?
This wasn't in the news story.
We had never, well, the first thing was we had never seen water so clear. I mean, you can, if you're on Clear Creek, you put your paddle in the water and
Yeah,
you don't
can't
see it. But here you can actually see fish on the bottom, and it was just amazing. I fell in love. It was like, wow, this is nirvana. So anyway, we managed to get around Rio Vista, and then we even came to a log jam. We saw how other people were doing it. They actually had to get out of their canoe and
I'm
lift the canoe.
impressed that there was anyone within sight past Rio Vista for y'all.
It's amazing how bad some of those teams were. But so we, the problem was Mom didn't think we should drink river water. We didn't really know about halazone or any kind of water purification back then. So we took 5 gallons in 1 gallon plastic jugs of drinking water, stretched out across the middle of the canoe and tied in with a rope.
Was she going to give you more water, or were those?
No, you could not yet. You
Right.
had to,
That's
I don't know.
Oh, you were just going to refill whenever you could.
We figured there would be parks,
Yeah.
and even if you found
a hose.
a vending machine or one of those service stations close to the river, and you can get the ice water out of that, was really a treat. We did that one year at Victoria, but it was several miles to the station. So
wow.
by the time we got back, the water was hot.
Oh gosh.
But yeah, we I don't know, we really hadn't planned much.
How many pounds of gear would you estimate you had brought?
Well, I know we weighed our canned food, and we had 40 pounds of canned food alone.
Gosh.
Lots of Vienna sausage, lots of beans, good healthy eating. Somebody said, you really ought to take some freeze-dried food because it's light. So Mom went and bought a big bag of dehydrated apples. They weren't really freeze-dried. They were still heavy.
Yeah.
But they were unedible. I mean, we said, we can't eat these. So my Aunt Helen said, don't worry, I can make candied apples out of these. So she added tons of sugar, cooked them forever. They were actually delicious. I mean, we had a big Tupperware container of freeze-dried
Candied apples.
that
Reconstituted.
Probably weighed 10 pounds. How we lifted the boat, I don't know. I mean,
Don't forget your sandwiches.
oh yeah, we did have, we had a loaf of bread. Mom made sandwiches, but then she put them all back in the little plastic wrapper. And that, it turns out, was not waterproof. So our sandwiches were all soggy.
What kind of sandwiches had she made?
Probably pressed turkey and various, real thin meats.
Yeah.
Like we were used to eating.
One slice per.
One slice, you would put mayonnaise on the bread, but then you scrape it back off. So the whole sack of bread probably wasn't a lot longer than the original loaf of bread, and didn't have much in between the bread. But the bread was shot anyways. I just remember when we did eat the sandwiches, we just ate the meat, wadded up the meat and ate it.
Oh.
Covered with river water.
I was going to say, it's been soaking in river water.
Soaked in whatever.
Unrefrigerated.
Whatever was in the bottom of the canoe. But yeah, we managed to get the cottonseed. Fortunately, somebody at the check-in had said, you really need a fiberglass repair kit. You need a way to patch this boat. I don't know why they didn't suggest duct tape. That would have been a lot easier. But we went to the auto parts store and bought a muffler repair kit. It was a fiberglass repair kit. But after we did wreck the boat in cottonseed, I mean, we had one hole you could put your fist through it. And several, I think there were 7 holes altogether.
Wow.
But a lot of them, a nice piece of gum, bubble gum, would fill it. And fortunately, we had brought plenty of gum.
Oh.
It had gotten wet with river water, but who cares? So anyway, we got out the muffler repair kit and read that you were supposed to put the impregnated fiberglass cloth on your muffler, wrap it all up, fire up the car, and drive it. And it was the heat of the muffler that would set the resin off, endothermic reaction, as I recall. So anyway, we did find that as hot as it is in Texas, it's not quite as hot as a muffler.
It's not the 200 degrees required to kick the resin.
But it didn't get tacky. I mean, the big patch at least was covered somewhat. It leaked, but not as bad as it could have leaked. So we had the boat kind of patched up. My job, I still don't think they let me take the bow or stern seat, but from the middle of the canoe, my job was to operate the bilge pump, which was a long pump, looked like a bicycle pump. So as we paddled down the river, I was constantly squirting a stream of water up over the side of the canoe. So if there had been a fire, we could have put it out, I think. But anyway, it was a long day. I do remember we managed to get around Staples Dam, and we actually made it all the way down to Prairie Lee 1. And at Prairie Lee 1, as we're paddling past the bridge, we are pretty sure we heard Mom start the Rambler. We had a Rambler station wagon, and we were hollering to let her know where we were. She hadn't seen us since the start. And we missed her. So we were below Prairie Lee 1 when it got dark. So we pulled over. We had air mattresses, big, heavy air mattresses, with they were made of fabric material. So Mom had sewed sheets to the air mattress itself.
Oh, no.
So you had a one-stop thing. It was like you aired it up, slid down into the sheet, and they were very comfortable.
Were they wet, though?
Probably.
Yeah.
But a wet sheet. But that actually would cool you off nicely at night. But anyway, that was where we spent the night, somewhere between Prairie Lee 1 and 2. And in the morning, Ricky, I guess, did his business and then came running back and said there was a man with a large dog heading our way. So we packed up, rolled up our sleeping bags, our air mattresses at least, and escaped. So we got away without getting caught trespassing. And it took us a while. It was around noon when we pulled into Luling, Highway 90, the gravel bar. And there was another team there. It was Tommy Tripp, who we had met earlier at one of the log jams. We were portaging this log jam, and he and his little lightweight canoe paddled right through a slot. There was
Oh, no.
There was a little hole off to the right, and he just slid right through, and he said, "You can pass on the right, boys."
Oh, no.
So anyway, that's always admired Tommy for that, telling us that we could have made it. But anyway, he was dropping out, and he suggested we do the same. He said, I mean, we would see people on the bank, and I must have heard it 100 times. They would say, are y'all late for this year or early for next year? Anyway, we were definitely in last place at that point, but we did catch up with the second to last team.
Shockingly. Did they have cutoff times? Like you had to make
Absolutely not.
No.
That was the neat thing about the race. It was like the gun went off, and you had until Wednesday, I think it was, to get to Cedar. The race had a few judges, but I think very few. There were a few friends of Lawrence Hagen. I remember Mr. Weedy, maybe it was the next year in 68, hollering at us as we were going by Victoria City Park, the butt ramp. And he said, checkpoint, checkpoint, so we had to identify ourselves.
Huh.
Yeah, that's about the only one I really remember. But they probably had a few. What they said in the race information was that they were going to have judges all up and down the river.
Oh, no.
We would never know if it was really just a fisherman or if it could be a judge. And it convinced me, that, hey, these could all be judges we're seeing. So the idea, and I actually borrowed that idea, and I would tell people the same thing during the race briefing.
Don't cheat because there's always somebody watching.
We have eyes everywhere. Anyway, and it turns out that there are a lot of fishermen that are watching the race. They would set up their fishing trip to coincide with the safari. And when a team did get towed by a motorboat one year,
oh wow, somebody saw it.
Somebody called the Houston Police Department.
Oh my gosh.
Because they said, I remember one year there were some policemen. So anyway, the word did get to us that somebody got towed. And we think we know who it was, but it was hard to prove. It was. They finally let it go.
So,
and I think I was the only team affected. We dropped from second place to third, and we said, forget it. If you're not first. Now, if it didn't move someone from first to second,
yeah,
that would have made a big difference. But second to third,
yeah,
who cares?
Well, it's still kind of not a nice thing to do. So when you got out at Lule 90 with the other guy, the solo, there was nobody there?
Nobody was there initially. Mom was following the lead boats, expecting to see us.
So she was in what, Gonzales or?
She was somewhere between probably Hoheim and Cuero. But we had a walkie-talkie, and she would drive in the middle of a bridge, pull out her walkie-talkie, and try to call us.
Oh, wow.
But we weren't answering. We were miles upstream.
Yeah.
So he was aware that we were lost somewhere, Mr. Hagen, the race chairman. So he's actually the one that found us and Tommy Tripp and Highway 90. He was very happy to see us alive. So that's how, somehow he got word to my mom, and I still don't know how he did that.
He must have sent somebody in a car or something. Go find the leaders. You'll find a mom and a Rambler.
But that was before cell phones and before ham radio operators. They drove a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, the head judge was constantly driving back up the river, and forth.
Do you remember how many boats were in the race that year?
I would have to go back and check, but maybe 20, something like that.
Not very
a
many.
lot,
Huh.
So,
and
anyhow.
did most boats have, I mean, you couldn't give them anything, no water, no ice, no food, no nothing, but did they have like a person that would follow them along, or was that kind of just drop them off and everybody goes to the
team
finish?
Captains were not required, so a lot of people just got dropped off at the start or maybe drove to the start, left their car, planned on getting it
Right.
someday.
Had a car at the finish.
So it made for some real interesting characters that we weren't, let's just say we probably weren't the only team that was ill prepared. So a lot of people just entered it, you know.
So after you got out, what did y'all do after dropping out?
Well, once again, my mom was just amazing. She had really gotten into the race. She, I'm sure, had it been years later and she'd been able to race in the race, she wouldn't have. Because she, even at the end, when she had Alzheimer's, she would have two things she would say. Have they had the safari yet? And then, were there any women in it?
Yeah, because there was no women the first time you raced, for sure.
Those were the questions she always had. And, we were just done. I mean, we had realized we did not know what we were doing. Time to go home with our tails between our legs. She said, no, we're going to Cuero.
Aw.
So we get in the car and we drive down, and I got to see the two lead boats go through the checkpoint. And Bob Naramore and Ben Nolan were single paddling a Sawyer Sabre, and it was the boat I ended up buying.
Oh, wow.
I bought their boat, and right with them was a sculling rig with Froggy Sanders, and I'm trying to remember, I think he was with Lee Van Sickle back in those days. But anyway, so he had a Seadrift sculling rig versus a Dallas area paddling boat. And the Dallas team had CAT, they were the Cats. And that was for Canoe Association of Texas.
Oh.
Which there's a little bobcat that was used for the logo of the Houston Canoe Club for years. It may still, there may be one somewhere around here, but at any rate, that was where it came from. They were, I think the Dallas group had a club, Houston had a club, and they were all part of what they were forming, which was the Canoe Association of Texas, the Cats.
Wow.
So anyway, we were just enthralled. We just thought, look at this, and you can stay up with these sculling rigs with single paddle.
Yeah.
Well, shortly after we saw them go through, because we saw them go through right at sundown, and Mom took us to a motel in Victoria where we spent the night, because we were going to watch them again.
Now, was she by herself this whole time? She didn't have anybody with her?
I think probably Mary, maybe Lee. We had the other sibling.
Okay.
Mike was not, he was probably in the armed services.
Right.
In the Air
So
Force
Aunt Mary and Uncle Lee were with
Dad
her.
was busy.
Yeah.
He was painting.
Working.
But anyway, at the very next bridge, we heard later, Bob and Ben tried to cut to the inside. There was a tree, a little bit of current, and they wrapped their boat.
Oh, no.
They went on to finish. They knew about duct tape. And I ended up buying that boat, but it was pretty mangled up. I mean, they wrapped it, finished dead last, but they didn't finish the race.
Wow.
But at that point, Froggy Sanders would have had the lead, and maybe it's Charlie Hall. That's it. Froggy Sanders and Charlie Hall. I'm pretty sure that's who it was. Anyway, so we were at the Moody Street Bridge in downtown Victoria that next morning, waiting for Froggy and Charlie to come through. And lo and behold, the Bloodworth brothers came.
Oh, wow.
Flying under the bridge. And only one was sculling, the other one was resting in the back. That's how they like to do it. And maybe he was even steering. I'm not sure if they had a rudder. Knowing the Bloodworths, I wouldn't be surprised to learn that they had a rudder on the boat. But at any rate, they were flying. And so I checked my watch. So when Froggy and Charlie came through, I hollered down some, I thought, very encouraging news. I said, you're 10 minutes back.
Oh, no.
And they were both rowing. They were trying their best to stay close. They both stopped. And I think it was Froggy that looked up and said, how many minutes?
Oh, no.
I said, 10 minutes. Well, everyone else on the bridge was glaring at me.
Oh, no.
Because they had been together at the boat ramp.
Oh, no.
They had lost 10 minutes in an hour. And they were not
and
happy.
One of them was laying down in the boat, too. So
it was, I've learned since, probably shouldn't holler the times to people. Let their team captain do that.
Oh, no.
But anyway, the Bloodworms went on to win the race. And Mom wasn't done. I mean, we left Victoria and came home. That would have been that early in that week. Mm. And the race finished, I think, the next Saturday at Freeport, at the park on the Brazos River, the old Brazos River Park or something. Hmm. So they would come down the intercoastal and then up the Brazos at the finish line. But we actually watched all the teams paddle in, got to hear the Bloodworms talking about their race.
Were they still doing that thing where you couldn't paddle at night? You had to gather up?
They had to leave Seadrift at the crack of dawn. I think they probably went all the way to Port O'Connor that day. Then they were supposed to cross Matagorda Bay. They didn't. So they trucked them around Sargent or wherever on the east side of Matagorda Bay or wherever they were. And then they would spend the night paddling or start the next day. And they did it in one-day segments. Mm. And so there were 6 boats that made it to the finish line.
Okay, so they were kind of probably not super close together, but they all finished that day.
They even timed it. I think the last day was short, so there wouldn't be a long wait between the first and last
That makes
boat.
it more exciting for the spectators.
Yeah, there was a crowd there. And in fact, Paula said, I think she went and watched one of the races in.
That was what?
Either made it or wanted to. But anyway, she knew about the race.
At least, 10 years before you met her?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would have been 67.
Wow.
So maybe not 10 years because we met in 72.
That's true.
Anyway, but, Mom would not let the race go. She, whether we were interested or not, she was. And I really think that got us, when we watched that, we got the ending, learned an awful lot. We learned so much racing that first year. We ended up buying the sixth-place boat. We bought the boat from the Cats. Drove our Volkswagen all the way to Dallas, which was an adventure in itself.
Oh, wow.
Strapped that boat on the Volkswagen, drove it home, and patched it. By then, we were getting pretty good at fiberglass, so we actually patched it up. We noticed that we were using these real narrow paddles. Everyone else had big wide. I mean, Sawyer was making like a 12-inch wide paddle at the time. So we couldn't afford that, but we took some shingles, like cedar shingles, and screwed them to our beaver paddles.
Oh, no.
Covered them with fiberglass.
Oh, my gosh.
And we had these, they look like snow shovels, very big paddles, bigger than anybody else's. And we entered the Lake Houston race, my brother and I. And we were just a couple of idiots in a Sawyer Super, which was a pro boat, but it was mangled. I mean, it was in bad shape. And we actually finished very respectably. I mean, respectfully. We were in the top few boats.
Wow.
Which blew everyone's mind. We didn't know much about steering, but we had learned that everyone switches sides. And during that race, we noticed they would say something like hut, or they would make a
Right.
noise, and then they would switch together. So we said, let's do that.
So you didn't even notice that in the safari watching them?
No. We just thought they were making silly noises.
Right.
But in that race, we realized, that's how they steer. So instead of saying hut, we came up with creative things like cold beer. And these guys would be so upset that we were staying up with them that oftentimes they would just quit paddling and let us go.
Oh, no.
So we would say, sandwich, and we knew they were hungry, cold beer,
Oh, no.
iced tea.
So you made a lot of friends.
Oh, yeah, we were very popular. But anyway, we learned a lot. And
Were there any other young guys, or were y'all it for the super young crowd?
I think we were probably the youngest, brashest, most
Yeah.
disgusting team you can imagine.
But Ricky, after the first year, was like, no more for me.
No, Ricky, and he got a new partner, bought a brand new boat, and we actually did some training runs together. That would have been in '68, and one of them was we saw the log jams. Mom drove us the swinging bridge. It was still a bridge. You could drive to it. Mm-hmm. We put in, pretty sure that's where we launched. Maybe it was Victoria. But anyway, we paddled down, found the log jam. Somebody had said you need to mark your trail with white paint. So we would just start heading off on the right side of the river, unfortunately, because the river does a sharp left. But there was water. It was the shortcuts going through.
No.
So we would mark white paint on a bunch of trees, and then we'd finally say, we better go back to the river. So I often wondered who followed these paths that we marked. But we finally just stayed with the river, portaged all the way around the log jam, and made it to top of the bridge.
Wow.
And Ricky Page had the can of white paint. So out of the goodness of his heart, he went under, I think on the outside of the bridge. He actually sprayed, Tom Goynes was here.
Oh, no.
1968. I kept saying, do not.
No.
And on the inside of the bridge, it had the whole crew.
Oh, no.
Tom and Jim Goynes, Ricky Page, Paul Byers, all this information, because we had a lot of white paint left over, so we defaced the
And
bridge.
because he was 18 and stupid.
And it was there for years. I mean, you'd paddle under and see Tom Goynes was there in 1960. But Ricky, actually it was Paul Byers was walking out in front of Ricky's house. It would have been pretty late that spring. We were still in school. I know St. Thomas was still having classes, but Paul was walking along, and there was a lightning strike, a thunderstorm going on, and a live wire, ends up breaking off the pole, and is in the street, bouncing around.
Oh, my gosh.
Paul ends up getting
Electrocuted.
hit by this live wire, and I guess it wouldn't let him go.
Oh.
So he's flopping around, and Ricky ran to the street to save his partner, and Ricky got electrocuted too. Ricky's brother, Bobby, who was my age, tried to save him, but when he grabbed all of them, for some reason it spit him loose. It repelled him. So anyway, both Ricky and Paul died in that electrocution incident.
Man.
So they had their boat at the start, and they awarded them something posthumously.
Aw.
But it was a tragic end of Ricky Page. He was a really good guy.
Oh,
Tried to save his partner. So anyway,
man. That is sad.
yeah.
Well,
So that kind of covers the start and the first year and on to the second. So anyway.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks.
Long one. A long one today.
long
You can
one
break it up.
with a sad ending.
Yes.
I'll do better.
Yes, indeed.